That single phone call destroyed 18 years of marriage because my daughter asked one innocent question my husband never expected anyone to ask. That single phone call destroyed 18 years of my marriage because my 12-year-old daughter asked one innocent question my husband never expected anyone to ask. Looking back now, I don't think my marriage ended the day I discovered the truth. It ended months earlier. I just hadn't realized it yet. If someone had told me that my own daughter would uncover the biggest lie my husband had ever told me, I would have laughed. Michael wasn't that kind of man. At least, that's what I believed. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 44 years old. For nearly 2 decades, I believed I had built a marriage most people hope to have. Not perfect, but steady, comfortable, predictable. The kind of marriage where you stopped buying expensive anniversary gifts because simply sitting together on the porch after dinner felt enough. Michael and I had been married for 18 years. We lived in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing about our lives looked unusual. I worked as an accountant for a local construction company. Michael owned a small HVAC business. He was respected, hardworking, friendly, the kind of man neighbors asked for help whenever something broke. If an elderly couple needed their furnace checked, Michael was there. If someone's air conditioner failed during summer, he stayed late until it worked. People trusted him. So did I. More than anyone. We had one daughter, Sophie, 12 years old, bright, funny, and far more observant than either of us realized. She had inherited Michael's smile, but thankfully, not his ability to lie. Every Sunday evening, we had the same routine. Pizza, movie night, no phones, no work, just the 3 of us. Or at least, that was how it used to be, about 8 months before everything fell apart. Those Sundays quietly disappeared. Michael suddenly became busier. His business, he said, was growing faster than expected. More emergency calls, more overnight jobs, more customers outside the city. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? His business really had been doing well. He even hired another technician, then another. Money wasn't a problem anymore. In fact, for the first time in years, things felt financially comfortable. We finally replaced our old family car. We remodeled the kitchen. Michael surprised me with a new dishwasher because he knew I hated washing dishes by hand. Looking back, those gifts weren't signs of love. They were distractions. But I couldn't see that then. Every second weekend, Michael visited his mother. His mother, Margaret, lived about 2 hours away in a small town. She was 76, widowed, and according to Michael, her health had been getting worse. Heart problems, arthritis, difficulty walking. Whenever he packed an overnight bag, he kissed my forehead, smiled, and said the exact same words. "I'll take care of Mom and be home tomorrow evening." Sometimes Sophie wanted to go with him. He always had an answer. "Grandma needs to rest. She's too tired for visitors." Next time. There was always a next time. That never came. One evening during dinner, Sophie looked up from her plate. "Mom, when was the last time we actually saw Grandma?" I stopped chewing. I tried to remember. Christmas? No. Thanksgiving? No. Maybe almost a year. Michael answered before I could. "She's embarrassed about being sick. She doesn't want anyone seeing her like this." Sophie nodded. She accepted the answer. Children usually do. But something about the way Michael avoided eye contact stayed with me longer than it should have. Not enough to make me suspicious. Just enough to make me uncomfortable. A few weeks later, Margaret's birthday came. I wrapped a soft blue sweater I'd spent an hour choosing. Sophie made a handmade birthday card covered in tiny flowers. Michael smiled when he saw it. "She'll love this." He packed both gifts into his car. The next evening, he came home smiling. Mom cried when she opened Sophie's card. Sophie beamed with pride. I smiled too. I even asked, "Did she like the sweater?" Michael answered immediately. It fit perfectly. Such a simple answer. So natural. So ordinary. Until months later, When I discovered Margaret had never received either gift, not the sweater, not the birthday card, not anything. But that revelation was still waiting for me. At the time, life simply moved forward, or at least, I thought it did. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I left work early because a meeting had been canceled. When I pulled into our driveway, Michael's truck was already there. That surprised me. He was supposed to be working across town. I walked inside quietly. His office door was almost closed. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard my name. Emma doesn't suspect anything. I froze. Michael's voice dropped lower. I said I'll handle it. A pause. Then, no. She still believes I'm with Mom every weekend. Silence. Then footsteps. I quickly walked toward the kitchen and pretended to unload groceries. A second later, Michael came out smiling. You're home early. So are you, he laughed. Job got canceled. Simple, easy, convincing. Except, his smile disappeared for just a fraction of a second when he realized I'd arrived without warning. It was barely noticeable. Most wives would have ignored it. I did too. At least, I tried. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I thought he was cheating. Honestly, that possibility never crossed my mind. I kept replaying only one sentence. Emma doesn't suspect anything. Suspect what? A surprise party? A business deal? A family issue? There were dozens of harmless explanations. I chose the one that let me sleep. The next morning, Michael left before sunrise. Another weekend. Another visit to his sick mother. He kissed my forehead. I'll be back tomorrow. Sophie hugged him tightly. Tell Grandma I love her. I will. He smiled, then drove away. About 3 hours later, while Sophie and I were baking chocolate cookies, the house phone rang. Sophie answered because her hands were clean. A moment later, she looked confused, then covered the receiver. Mom. It's Grandma. I smiled. Put her on speaker. Sophie hesitated, then whispered something that changed everything. Mom, Grandma says Dad hasn't visited her in almost 5 months. Sophie slowly handed me the phone. Her small fingers were trembling just enough for me to notice. Mom, she whispered again. Grandma says Dad hasn't visited her in almost 5 months. For a second, nothing made sense. I forced a smile because children watch our faces before they listen to our words. I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. I pressed the speaker button. Hello, Margaret. Her warm voice answered immediately. Emma. Oh, sweetheart, it's so nice to hear your voice. There was nothing unusual about her tone. No weakness, no exhaustion. Certainly nothing that sounded like the woman Michael had described for months. How are you feeling? I asked carefully. I'm doing much better now, she laughed softly. The physical therapy is finally helping. Physical therapy? Michael had told us she could barely walk. He said she struggled to leave her bed. Before I could organize my thoughts, Sophie smiled brightly. Grandma, Daddy said he visited you last weekend. There was silence. Just 2, maybe 3 seconds. Long enough for my heart to start beating faster. Last weekend? Margaret sounded genuinely confused. No, sweetheart. I haven't seen your father since February. I felt every muscle in my body become still. February. Today was the middle of July. 5 months. Exactly what Sophie had whispered. I glanced toward the kitchen calendar hanging beside the refrigerator. Every other weekend. Every single visit. Every overnight stay, every excuse. My mind started counting them automatically. 10 weekends, 10 lies. Margaret continued speaking, completely unaware of what was happening inside my house. I've called him a few times. He's always busy. I figured work must be keeping him occupied. Sophie looked at me, not frightened, just confused. But Dad always says he's with you. Margaret hesitated. I'm afraid not, sweetheart. I wish he came more often. He keeps promising. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too small. I swallowed carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. We actually sent you a birthday sweater a few months ago. Oh? I never received one. And Sophie's birthday card? What birthday card? Sophie slowly lowered her eyes. She had spent nearly 3 hours making that card. She had even sprinkled tiny pieces of glitter inside because she wanted Grandma to smile. Michael had looked both of us in the eye and lied. Not once, not twice, over and over again. I ended the conversation as gently as I could. We'll come visit soon. I'd love that, Margaret replied. And Emma, tell Michael I miss him. I certainly will. The call ended. Silence settled over the kitchen. Sophie finally asked the question I couldn't answer. Mom, why would Dad lie? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Because I didn't know. Not yet. That afternoon, I tried convincing myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Michael had been helping someone else. Maybe he didn't want his mother worrying. Maybe. Every explanation sounded weaker than the one before it. By evening, I had made one decision. I wasn't going to accuse him, not without knowing the truth. Years earlier, my father had given me advice I never forgot. Never confront someone while you're still guessing. People tell you much more when they think you know nothing. So I waited. Michael came home just after 7 the next evening, exactly on schedule, just like always. He walked through the front door carrying a grocery bag. I brought your favorite cheesecake. He kissed my forehead, then hugged Sophie. How's my favorite girl? She hugged him back, but not as tightly as usual. Children notice changes before adults do. Michael either didn't notice or pretended not to. During dinner, he talked about his mother's condition. The doctor adjusted her medication. She's sleeping better now. I fixed her porch railing. She asked about both of you. Each sentence landed like another stone. I watched him carefully. His face never changed. No hesitation. No nervous smile. Nothing. He had practiced this. Sophie quietly stirred her mashed potatoes, then asked the question. When did you fix Grandma's porch? Michael smiled. Yesterday afternoon. She looked down. I talked to Grandma yesterday. He froze. Only for half a heartbeat. But I saw it. What do you mean? She called. I asked if she liked my birthday card. Michael slowly put down his fork. The room became painfully quiet. What? Did Grandma say? She said she never got it. His eyes met mine, searching, measuring, trying to determine how much we knew. Then, he laughed. A short, awkward laugh. Oh. I must have forgotten it in the truck. The sweater too? I asked calmly. He nodded too quickly. Yeah. I completely forgot both. Sophie frowned. But Grandma also said you haven't visited since February. Another pause. Longer this time. Then Michael sighed dramatically. I didn't want your grandmother to know. Know what? I asked. I've actually been staying in hotels closer to work. I didn't want her feeling guilty. So I just told everyone I was with her. It sounded reasonable. Almost. Except, one detail didn't fit. If you weren't visiting your mother, why pack overnight clothes every other weekend? He answered instantly. Sometimes I work late. It's easier than driving home. Again. Reasonable. But only if you ignored everything else. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry. I should have told you. I smiled politely. It's okay. Inside, nothing felt okay anymore. That night, Michael fell asleep within minutes. I didn't. For the first time in 18 years, I listened to him breathing beside me and wondered who he really was. Around midnight, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. The screen lit up. He had forgotten to silence it. Normally, I would have ignored it. I always had. Trust had never required curiosity. But tonight, everything was different. The notification appeared for only a second before the screen went dark. I only caught 6 words. Can't wait until next weekend. No name, just a number. My stomach tightened. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a customer. Maybe... No. Customers didn't send hearts. I quietly turned away before he woke. I didn't touch the phone. I didn't unlock it. I didn't need to. Because something inside me had already changed. For the first time since we married, I wasn't trying to prove my husband was innocent anymore. I was trying to understand how many lies I had mistaken for love. I had no idea. The biggest secret wasn't hidden inside that phone. It was waiting in the trunk of Michael's truck. And less than 48 hours later, my daughter would be the one to find it. I didn't tell Sophie what I was thinking. She was still sitting on the garage floor, staring at the small pink gift bag she'd just pulled from the back of Michael's truck. Inside was a silver bracelet. Delicate, beautiful, and definitely not mine. She looked up at me. Mom, did Dad buy this for you? For one brief second, I wanted to lie. I wanted to protect her from what I was beginning to understand. But children know when adults lie, especially after they've just discovered one. I don't think so. She carefully turned the bracelet over in her hands. There was a tiny white envelope tucked underneath it. At first, I thought it was just a receipt. Then Sophie pulled it out. There's a card, she smiled. Maybe it's for Grandma. I took the envelope from her before she could open it. My hands were suddenly trembling. Across the front, written in Michael's handwriting, were just 3 words. To my future. Not to Mom. Not happy birthday. Not even a name. Just to my future. Something cold settled deep inside my chest. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. Only 1 sentence. Next weekend, everything finally becomes ours. No signature, no explanation, just those 7 words. Everything becomes ours. I read it again and again, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding it. But there was nothing complicated about those words. Someone was planning a future with my husband, a future that clearly didn't include me. Sophie looked at my face. She didn't ask about the letter. She already knew. Whatever was written inside had changed something. Mom, are you okay? I forced a smile. The kind mothers learn to fake when their children need them more than they need the truth. I'm okay. It was the biggest lie I had told all day. I folded the note carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Then I noticed something else lying beneath the gift bag. A hotel key card. Not from anywhere near Michael's mother's town. It belonged to a luxury boutique hotel. Nearly 3 hours in the opposite direction. The hotel name looked familiar. I couldn't remember why. Until suddenly, it hit me. That was the exact hotel where Michael claimed he had attended a business seminar 2 months earlier. The seminar that had supposedly lasted only 1 day. Then why? Was there a room key issued just yesterday? I turned it over. Room 417, checkout date, tomorrow morning. Michael wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that hotel this weekend. He had told us. He was with his sick mother. My heartbeat echoed in the silent garage. One lie, then another, and now, evidence I could actually hold in my hand. I looked at Sophie. She wasn't looking at the bracelet anymore. She was looking at me, waiting, trusting me to explain something I couldn't explain myself. At that exact moment, the sound of tires rolled into our driveway. Michael was home. His truck door slammed shut. Footsteps moved toward the garage. Closer, closer, then stopped. The garage door slowly began to open. Sunlight spilled across the concrete floor, landing directly on the bracelet, the hotel key, and the note still lying in my hand. Michael stepped inside. His eyes dropped to the floor, then to the envelope, then to my face. Every bit of color disappeared from his expression. For the first time in 18 years, my husband didn't even try to smile. He whispered just one sentence. "Emma, that's not what you think." I looked him straight in the eyes, and for the first time since we met, I answered without believing a single word that was about to come out of his mouth. The next morning, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's frightened face outside that hospital room. The woman hadn't looked surprised. She had looked guilty. That difference mattered. After dropping Sophie at school, I drove back to St. Mary's Hospital. Not as a wife, not even as a victim. I walked in like someone searching for evidence, because instinct had stopped being a feeling. It had become survival. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Carter, your mother-in-law is resting." "I know. I actually came to ask about visitor records." "I'm sorry. We can't release that information." "I understand." I smiled politely. "But my husband listed me as emergency contact." She hesitated. "I only need to know one thing. Did anyone besides Daniel visit yesterday?" She looked around before lowering her voice. "There was..." She stopped herself. "I'm really sorry." "Hospital policy." I nodded. I wasn't angry. People protecting rules weren't my enemy. Someone else was. Instead of leaving, I walked toward the cafeteria. Hospitals are strange places. Everyone eventually ends up there. Doctors, nurses, families, security guards, and people talk, especially when they've seen the same visitors every day. I ordered coffee and sat quietly. 15 minutes later, an elderly volunteer approached my table. "You here for someone?" "My mother-in-law." "Oh." She smiled kindly. "Mrs. Margaret Carter?" "Yes." "Sweet lady." "You've been here often?" "No. My husband usually comes." The woman frowned. "Your husband?" "Daniel." "Oh." Another pause. "I thought..." She stopped. "You thought what?" She looked embarrassed. "Nothing." "No." I smiled gently. "Please." "I'd rather know." She leaned closer. "I just assumed that younger blonde woman was his wife." Everything inside me froze. "A blonde woman?" "Yes." "Very pretty." "They've been coming together for months." "Months. Not weeks. Months." I kept my face perfectly still. What did she look like? Maybe late 30s. Elegant. Always carrying flowers. She called Margaret Mom. I almost dropped my coffee. She called my mother-in-law Mom. I thanked the volunteer and walked outside before my legs gave out. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel. Months. Not days. Months. That meant Daniel hadn't suddenly started lying. He had built an entirely different life, and somehow, his own mother was part of it. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer. This time I did. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes." "My name is Rachel. I'm one of the nurses. I probably shouldn't be calling." My heartbeat quickened. "What's wrong?" "It's your mother-in-law." "What happened?" "Nothing medical." "It's what she said." I stayed silent. Rachel continued. "When she woke briefly this morning, she thought I was someone else. And she asked, 'Has Daniel's wife gone home yet?' I whispered. 'Which wife?' Rachel became quiet. "That's exactly why I called." My entire body went cold. "There are 2?" Rachel sighed. "I don't know. I only know she corrected herself." Then she whispered, "No. Not the first wife. The second one." Silence. Then the line disconnected. I stared at my dashboard for almost a full minute. Second wife. Not first wife. Second wife. What did that even mean? Daniel had only married once. Me. Unless someone wanted everyone to believe otherwise. I drove straight to attorney Linda Brooks. She looked at my face once. You found something. I think I found everything. I repeated every conversation, every word, the volunteer, the nurse, the blonde woman, the word, second wife. Linda didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she opened a legal pad. There are only 3 possibilities. 1. Hospital confusion. 2. Mental confusion. 3. She looked directly at me. Your husband has introduced another woman as his wife. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Linda asked, Do you know the blonde woman? I thought, then remembered something. 3 months earlier, Daniel had attended a charity dinner. He told me spouses weren't invited, but someone had uploaded photos online. In one blurry background image, a blonde woman stood beside him. I remembered asking. He laughed. Just someone from marketing. At the time, I believed him. Linda immediately hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Hill, former police detective, quiet, patient, the kind of man who noticed everything. He only asked one question. Do you want proof? Or do you want the truth? Aren't they the same? He shook his head. No. Proof wins court. Truth changes lives. I'll get both. 3 days later, Marcus called. You need to come. He handed me a thick envelope. Inside were photographs. Daniel entering a luxury apartment. The same blonde woman, holding hands, shopping together, cooking, walking a dog, celebrating birthdays, Christmas decorations, Thanksgiving dinner, pictures spanning almost 2 years. 2 years. My marriage hadn't been collapsing recently. It had been replaced. Then Marcus slid one final photograph across the desk. My breathing stopped. Daniel, the blonde woman, my mother-in-law, all smiling together, around a birthday cake. The cake read, Happy Family Day. Family. Not visitors. Not co-workers. Family. Marcus finally spoke. I also learned something else. They've introduced themselves everywhere as husband and wife. Apartment neighbors. Restaurants. Vacation resorts. Even insurance paperwork. Insurance paperwork? Linda immediately looked up. What paperwork? Marcus nodded. I think you'll want to hear this carefully. Your husband recently submitted beneficiary changes. I felt sick. Beneficiary? Yes. He tried removing you. And naming... He looked down at his notes. Emily Dawson. The blonde woman. But here's the strange part. The insurance company rejected it. Why? Marcus answered quietly. Because your signature was required. I had never signed anything. Someone had tried. Linda slowly closed the folder, then looked directly into my eyes. This isn't just an affair anymore. This may be fraud. And if he's willing to forge insurance documents, she paused. We have no idea what else he's forged. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated. It was Sophie. Her voice was shaking. Mom, I think Dad just came to school. My heart nearly stopped. He wants to take me somewhere. When Lily rushed to her daughter's school, she discovered Daniel wasn't trying to apologize. He was trying to stop Sophie from telling the one secret that could destroy everything. Sophie's voice was trembling so badly I almost couldn't understand her. Mom, I think Dad is here. My entire body went cold. What do you mean? He's outside the school. He says he wants to take me for lunch. When? Right now. I looked at the dashboard clock. 11:42 a.m. Daniel had never picked Sophie up from school during the day, not once in 14 years. Listen to me carefully. Where are you? In the front office. Don't leave. Stay with the secretary. I'm coming. I drove faster than I ever had in my life. Every red light felt like punishment. Every slow driver felt unbearable. The whole way there, one question kept repeating in my head. Why today? Why now? Then I remembered what Marcus had said. Fraud, forged documents, insurance. If Daniel knew I had started asking questions, if he suspected I was getting close, he wouldn't come after me first. He'd come after the one person who knew something he couldn't control. Sophie. When I reached the school, I saw Daniel standing beside his SUV. He looked calm, too calm. The principal stood beside him with crossed arms. Sophie remained safely inside the office. The moment Daniel saw my car, his smile disappeared. Lily. I was just taking Sophie to lunch. I walked straight toward him. Without telling me? I texted. No. You sent one message 5 minutes before arriving. That's not asking. It's informing. The principal looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Carter, I wasn't comfortable releasing Sophie without your permission. I turned toward her. Thank you. She nodded. Daniel forced a small laugh. This is getting ridiculous. I'm still her father. And I'm still her mother. Neither of us looked away. Finally, he sighed. I just wanted to spend time with my daughter, I answered quietly. Then why didn't you come last week? Or the week before? Or the last 3 months? Silence. Sophie slowly walked outside. She looked from me to Daniel, then back again. Dad, were you really just taking me to lunch? Daniel smiled. Of course. She didn't move. Instead, she asked one question. The blonde lady. Was she there too? Daniel froze. I watched every bit of color drain from his face. You saw her? Sophie nodded. I saw her at Grandma's hospital. I didn't tell Mom because... Her voice cracked. I thought maybe she was your nurse. Daniel swallowed hard. When did you see her? The last time Grandma was sick. You hugged her. You kissed her forehead. You called her Emily. My heart stopped. Daniel had no idea Sophie had already seen them together. He quickly looked at me. Lily. I can explain. I shook my head. No. You've had 2 years to explain. Sophie slowly reached into her backpack. I have something. She pulled out her old tablet, the one she used mostly for homework. I forgot to tell you, she whispered. I made a video. Daniel's eyes widened instantly. What video? It was Grandma's birthday. I wanted to record everyone singing. I thought it'd be funny. She unlocked the tablet. I forgot it was still here. Then she handed it to me. I pressed play. The first few seconds showed balloons, cake, Margaret smiling. Then the camera moved. Daniel stood beside Emily, his arm around her waist. Margaret smiled proudly. Then, the words that changed everything. Margaret laughed. You two already look like husband and wife. Emily smiled. We're getting there. Daniel answered. 1 more year. Then everything will finally be ours. The room became completely silent. I replayed the sentence. 1 more year. Then everything will finally be ours. Not. We'll finally be together. Not. The divorce will be over. Everything would be ours. That wasn't love. That was planning. Daniel immediately reached toward the tablet. Give me that. Sophie stepped backward. No. His voice became sharper. Sophie, give it here. I stepped between them. You don't get to scare her. The principal had heard enough. Mr. Carter, I think you should leave. Daniel looked around. Teachers had begun watching. Parents waiting outside were staring. His perfect image was starting to crack. That evening, Marcus arrived at my house. I showed him Sophie's video. He watched it twice, then smiled for the first time. This changes everything. How? It proves intent. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning. Linda arrived 30 minutes later. She watched the recording carefully, then paused it on one frame. Emily was holding papers, legal papers. Marcus enlarged the image. The resolution wasn't perfect, but one word could still be read. Transfer. Linda immediately became serious. I think I know what this is. She looked directly at me. Do you still have your father's lake house? Yes. My name is on the deed. She nodded. And your investment portfolio? Also mine. Before marriage. She became very quiet. Lily. I don't think Daniel only wanted a divorce. I think he wanted your assets. The next morning, Marcus called. I found Emily. She's not who Daniel said she was. What do you mean? She doesn't work in medical sales. Never did. Then who is she? Marcus answered slowly. She worked for a title company. My stomach tightened. A title company? She specializes in property transfers. Linda immediately understood. Oh my God, Marcus continued. She has access to deed records, mortgage filings, ownership documents. They didn't meet by accident. They met through property. Everything suddenly connected. The forged insurance forms, the transfer documents, the fake separation papers, the hospital visits, Margaret's approval, the phrase, one more year. Daniel hadn't simply fallen in love. He had partnered with someone who understood real estate paperwork, someone who knew exactly how to move assets. That afternoon, another envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was only one photograph. It showed Daniel standing outside my father's lake house, taken just 3 days earlier. Across the back, someone had written 5 words. You're already too late. I stared at the picture, then noticed something terrifying. Behind Daniel, workers were changing the locks. When Lily raced to her father's lake house, she discovered the locks weren't the only thing that had been changed. Inside, a hidden safe contained one document Daniel never knew existed, and it destroyed his entire plan forever. The anonymous photograph wouldn't leave my mind. Daniel stood outside my father's lake house. Workers were replacing the locks. Written across the back were 5 simple words. You're already too late. I read them again, then again. My hands had gone cold. The lake house wasn't just another property. It had belonged to my father. After he passed away, he left it entirely to me. Daniel had never liked that. He used to joke that one day we'd sell it and buy something better. I always refused. It wasn't about the money. It was the last place where I could still hear my father's laugh. If Daniel was there, nothing good could come from it. Linda didn't waste a second. We're leaving now. Marcus grabbed his coat. I'll call the sheriff in that county. An hour later, the 3 of us were driving north. The whole ride, I barely spoke. Every mile brought back another memory. Fishing with Dad, learning to paddle a canoe, summer evenings on the dock, Christmas by the fireplace. The lake house wasn't expensive, it was priceless, because memories can't be insured. When we finally arrived, 2 construction trucks were parked outside. Workers were unloading tools. One man recognized Marcus's badge immediately. Can I help you? Marcus pointed toward the front door. Who hired you? The foreman checked his clipboard. Mr. Daniel Carter. Contract says emergency lock replacement. Linda looked at me. Did you authorize this? No. Never. Marcus asked calmly. Did he show ownership papers? Yes. He had documents. And a driver's license. My stomach twisted. Linda immediately requested copies. The foreman handed over the work order. Everything looked official. Except, the owner's signature wasn't mine. Someone had forged it. Again. Marcus called the sheriff. Within 20 minutes, deputies arrived. The workers immediately stopped. Nobody argued. They simply wanted to know who actually owned the property. Linda removed a folder from her briefcase. The original deed. Signed, recorded, stamped. Only one owner's name appeared. Lily Carter. The deputy compared both documents. The replacement authorization is fraudulent. The foreman looked horrified. We had no idea. I know, Marcus answered. You were victims too. One deputy carefully unlocked the front door. Nothing looked disturbed. Furniture remained exactly where I'd left it. Family photographs still lined the hallway. Dad's old fishing hat still hung beside the fireplace. For one brief second, I thought maybe we had arrived in time. Then Marcus spoke. Lily. Come here. Inside my father's study. Every drawer had been opened. File cabinets emptied. Boxes searched. Someone wasn't stealing furniture. They were looking for paperwork. Very specific paperwork. Linda quietly asked, "What used to be here?" I looked around. Dad kept old business records. Insurance. Property documents. Family files. Marcus nodded. So Daniel wasn't guessing. He knew something valuable existed. I suddenly remembered. The safe. Everyone looked at me. My father installed a wall safe years ago. It was hidden behind a painting. We rushed toward the bookshelf. The painting still hung there. Marcus carefully lifted it. The safe remained untouched. Relief flooded through me, then disappeared immediately. The keypad had deep scratches. Someone had tried opening it. Many times. Marcus smiled slightly. He couldn't crack the code. I entered the 6 numbers I hadn't used in years. My father's birthday. The lock clicked. Inside lay several folders, an old leather journal, a small velvet box, and one sealed envelope. Across the front, written in my father's handwriting, were 4 words. Only for Lily. I couldn't breathe. My father had written this years before he died. My hands shook opening it. Inside was a letter. My sweet Lily. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here to protect you. I've watched people my entire life. The good ones never ask what they can take. The dangerous ones always do. If anyone ever pressures you to sell this house, don't. Because the lake house isn't the most valuable thing I left you. My heart stopped. I looked at Linda. She whispered, "Keep reading." Behind the false wall inside the basement workshop is a second safe. Nobody knows about it except you now. Everything your grandfather built is inside. Grandfather? I stared at the page. Dad had never mentioned another safe. We hurried downstairs. The workshop looked exactly as I remembered. Old tools, fishing gear, workbench. Marcus carefully examined the wall. There. One wooden panel looked newer than the others. He removed 4 screws. Behind it was another steel safe, much larger, hidden perfectly. Inside were dozens of original documents, stock certificates, land deeds, investment records, family trust papers, and something else. Linda suddenly gasped. "Oh my God." "What?" She carefully lifted a thick document. "This trust." She flipped through the pages rapidly. It was never closed. I frowned. "What does that mean?" She looked directly into my eyes. "Lily, your grandfather never transferred everything. There was a second family trust." My heart pounded. "How much?" Linda kept reading. Finally, she looked up. "Worth approximately $12.8 million. Silence filled the room. I couldn't speak. Not because of the money, because my father had protected it without ever telling anyone. Marcus immediately understood Daniel's obsession. This is what he was searching for. He somehow learned another trust existed, but he never found it. Then Linda reached the final page. Her expression suddenly changed. There it is. What? The succession clause. She slowly smiled. It changes everything. The trust contained one condition. If Lily ever divorced because of proven marital fraud, her husband would receive nothing. Not $1, not one property, not one share. Instead, everything remained solely under Lily's ownership forever. Dad had written one additional sentence beside the clause. Character determines inheritance. Tears filled my eyes. Even years after his death, my father had protected me, not with anger, not with revenge, with wisdom. At that exact moment, Marcus's phone rang. He answered, listened, then slowly looked toward us. They found Daniel. Where? Marcus answered quietly. He wasn't running. He was at the county recorder's office, trying to file the forged property transfer. He had walked directly into detectives already waiting for him. Linda slowly closed the trust folder, then looked toward me. For months, he thought he was building a future. But today, he lost everything. Daniel had no idea. The biggest secret in our family had never been inside our marriage. It had been hidden behind an old painting, waiting for the only person my father truly trusted. Daniel's arrest spread through our town faster than I expected. Not because anyone enjoyed seeing another family fall apart, but because no one could believe someone who had always appeared so dependable had spent nearly 2 years building a second life while quietly trying to take everything from the first. He wasn't arrested for having an affair. Affairs destroy marriages. They aren't crimes. He was arrested because forged signatures, fraudulent property filings, identity fraud, and attempted financial deception are crimes. There is a difference. One breaks a heart, the other breaks the law. 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing began. I hadn't planned to attend. Part of me wanted to stay home with Sophie and let the attorneys handle everything. But Linda reminded me gently, "You've spent months being afraid of the truth. Today, you don't have to be." So I went. The courtroom was smaller than television makes them look. No dramatic music, no shouting lawyers, no audience waiting for shocking surprises, just wooden benches, fluorescent lights, stacks of paperwork, and lives permanently changing. Daniel entered wearing a dark gray suit, the same one he'd worn to Sophie's middle school graduation. Seeing him in it hurt more than I expected, because for one brief second, I remembered the man I married. Then I remembered the man who locked honesty outside our marriage long before I ever discovered Chicago. Emily entered a few minutes later. She looked exhausted. She hadn't spoken publicly since cutting off contact with Daniel. When our eyes met, she walked toward me. "Lily, I'm sorry. I know those words aren't enough." "They aren't," I answered honestly. She nodded. "I know." Then she reached into her bag. "I brought everything." She handed Linda a flash drive. "I kept copies. Every email. Every text. Every recording. I didn't know he was married. But after Chicago, I realized I might be the only person who could prove when the lies began." Linda smiled politely. "You did the right thing." Emily shook her head. "I should have asked more questions." I looked at her quietly. So should he. When the hearing started, prosecutors presented only facts. No emotional speeches, just evidence. Bank records, forged signatures, property filings, insurance documents, expense reports, the fake separation agreement, Sophie's birthday recording, security footage, everything connected, piece by piece, lie by lie, until there was nowhere left to hide. Then something happened no one expected. Margaret requested permission to testify. The courtroom became silent. She walked slowly toward the witness stand. Her health had improved, but she looked years older than I remembered. Not because of illness, because guilt is heavy. She took the oath, then looked directly at me. "I owe Lily the truth." The judge nodded. "You may proceed." Margaret closed her eyes. For almost 2 years. I knew about Emily. A wave of whispers spread across the courtroom. I believed Daniel when he said the marriage was already over. He told me Lily only stayed because of money. He said the divorce papers were signed. I believed my son. Her voice broke. The same mistake Daniel made with other people. I made with my own daughter-in-law. She turned toward me. "I'm sorry. I chose convenience over truth. I never once asked you." The prosecutor asked quietly, "When did you realize Daniel was lying?" Margaret answered without hesitation. "The day Sophie handed him that birthday card. I watched my granddaughter smiling at a father who had already replaced her. I knew then. My son wasn't protecting himself. He was destroying his family. Daniel couldn't even look at her. For the first time, he looked completely alone. Then came the final witness, Marcus. He calmly explained every document, every forgery, every false filing, every attempt to gain control of the lake house. Finally, he held up the forged deed beside the original. They appear similar, but they're not. The forged signature copies handwriting. The original carries intention. That sentence stayed with me, because marriages are exactly the same. Promises can be copied. Commitment cannot. Then Daniel surprised everyone. He asked to speak. His attorney advised against it. He stood anyway. "I never wanted this." Linda whispered beside me. "Listen carefully. People reveal themselves most clearly when they're desperate." Daniel looked toward the judge. "I made mistakes. I lied. I cheated. I admit that. But I never meant to hurt Lily." The prosecutor stood. "Mr. Carter, did you forge her signature?" "Yes." "Did you submit fraudulent documents?" "Yes." "Did you secretly move marital assets?" "Yes." "Did you tell another woman your marriage had already ended?" "Yes." "Then explain. How exactly did you avoid hurting your wife?" Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because there wasn't an answer. The judge reviewed everything for nearly an hour. Finally, he returned. His decision was calm, measured, clear. Daniel was found responsible for multiple counts of fraud, forgery, attempted unlawful property transfer, and financial deception. Restitution would be paid. Probation would follow. Professional licensing consequences would be referred separately. Every forged filing was permanently voided. Every fraudulent transfer reversed. Every legal cost assigned to Daniel. The lake house remained mine. The family trust remained untouched, and every attempt to take it failed. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Microphones, cameras, questions. I ignored every one of them. I had nothing left to prove. Daniel caught up with me in the parking lot. "Lily, please." I stopped walking. "I know I don't deserve another chance." "No, you don't." "I know. I wanted you to know. I loved you." I looked at him for a long moment. "I believe you." Hope appeared briefly in his eyes. Then I continued. "You loved me. But eventually, you loved the life you wanted more." Hope disappeared. Because sometimes the truth isn't cruel. It's simply accurate. Months passed. The divorce became final. The legal cases ended. The headlines disappeared. Life quietly continued. Sophie started high school. Therapy helped. Not because it erased pain, but because it taught her pain didn't have to make every decision forever. One afternoon, she asked me something. "Mom, if Dad hadn't been caught, would he have stopped?" I thought carefully before answering. "I don't know. But I know this. Character isn't revealed when someone gets caught. It's revealed by what they choose when they believe nobody is watching." She nodded silently. Emily wrote me one final letter before moving away. Inside, she included something unexpected, the apartment key, with one sentence. "I'm returning everything that never belonged to me." I never replied. Not because I hated her, because some stories don't need another chapter. A year later, I reopened my father's lake house, not to sell it, not to escape, but to live there part-time. Every Friday evening, Sophie and I drove north. We fished from the old dock, cooked simple dinners, watched sunsets. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't. Healing doesn't always sound like conversations. Sometimes it sounds like silence that finally feels safe. One evening, Sophie found my father's letter again. She read the final sentence aloud. "Character determines inheritance." She smiled. "I thought Grandpa meant money." "So did I answered. But he wasn't talking about money. He was talking about peace. Years later, people occasionally asked whether I ever regretted going to Chicago. My answer never changed. I regret the lies. I don't regret discovering them. Because the truth didn't destroy my life. The lies already had. The truth simply showed me where to begin rebuilding. The last time I saw Daniel was at Sophie's college graduation. We sat on opposite sides of the auditorium. He looked older, quieter. Life had humbled him. After the ceremony, he walked over. "I've spent years wishing I could change that weekend in Chicago." I smiled gently. "I don't." He looked surprised. "If we hadn't gone, I would still be married to someone I never really knew." For the first time, neither of us had anything left to argue about. He nodded, then walked away. That evening, Sophie and I drove to the lake house one more time. The water was perfectly still. The porch light glowed warmly against the dark. She unlocked the front door, then paused. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "The surprise trip really did change everything." It did. Just not the way we expected. We laughed. A quiet laugh. The kind that only comes after surviving something you once believed would break you forever. I stepped inside the house my father had protected. The house Daniel tried to steal. The house that ultimately reminded me of the greatest lesson my father ever left behind. People can take your trust. They can take your time. They can even try to take your future. But they can never take your dignity unless you hand it to them yourself. I locked the front door, slipped the key into my pocket, and looked around the room filled with family photographs. For the first time in a very long while, I wasn't closing a door on my past. I was opening one to the life that had been waiting for me all along.